Hi there, my name is Bruno Watt. I'm the Principal Platform Engineer here at Hypermedia-au. Today, in our ongoing series about Backstage, I'm going to be talking to you about catalog and workload initialization. In the world of GitOps, one of the most difficult things to come to terms with is how we manage our manifests. And in the model of pragmatic GitOps, we accept that software engineering teams don't have the time and patience to work with thousands and thousands of manifest files. So instead, we want to leverage an internal developer portal to allow software engineering teams to get the benefits of GitOps without having to become platform engineers. So before we get into the cool demo, we're just going to have to get a little bit of theory out of the way. So in future episodes, we're going to cover these in a little bit more detail, but basically let's have a look at some of the entities that help drive Backstage to allow us to automate some of our GitOps processes through an interface. The three things in this diagram that we want to pay attention to are components, templates, and users and groups. So components are really the core entity in Backstage. So that's talking about your software that you build or software that you buy potentially as well. But basically it will be microservices, it will be websites, it will be a Java library or an NPM module, all of the things that are actually the software that exists within your system. These live within systems, they expose APIs, and they can consume resources. But we'll come back to those another time. Templates are the way that we initialize these components in a structured and standardized way. Backstage has a tool called the scaffolder, which basically allows us to create these templates, use some actions that are not dissimilar to GitHub actions to then go and create repositories and automate the other processes that we need to perform when we create new repositories. Finally, we have the groups and the users. So groups and users are really important in Backstage, and that's because of one of the superpowers of Backstage is discoverability. And we'll have a look at that in a moment, but basically by making sure that you map all of your technical assets and you map them into the organization down to ownership of users and groups, and then you're really going to get the best out of the system going forward. And some of the automation that we're going to see, you can only really realize if you've done this. Right, and before we do get onto the demonstration, let's just have a quick general talk about the structure of our automation system. So on the top tier there, we have Backstage that we're going to look at. That's the interface that humans will use when working with the system. But that is a completely separate system to the actual automation itself. All of that happens within our GitOps repository layer. So all of these are repositories that live in GitHub, and they're all catalogs of different varieties. Our catalogs all have identical structure inside, but they do different things. So our add-on catalog, hey kitty, its job is to install all of the bits and pieces that live inside the cluster to support your software. Not just the things that you see in those images, but everything that you need from certificate manager, secrets manager, observability, affordances, all of these things that you actually require. Next, we have our platform metadata, which is not really a catalog, but it kind of is. That's where we insert information about our service catalogs and other things about our overall environments that we might need to use in decision-making and continuous delivery processes. So in the background behind Backstage and right next to GitHub, if you will, we have a series of microservices that are listening to events from GitHub and other places and then performing events. And in a future video, we'll have a look at some of those. The glue in all of this is the catalog bootstrap. So the catalog bootstrap is basically a way for us to prepare Argo CD for repositories that don't exist yet, that are going to come in the future. So we can see in that catalog bootstrap, we have an Argo CD app of apps, and there's a folder there that basically every time we create a new deployment catalog, we create an entry, we create an application in that folder, and that application's job is purely to point over to the deployment catalog's bootstrap, which then in turn points into the catalog within itself, where we could have any number of services that represent microservices or websites or whatever other assets that you're actually deploying. So it's through this dance of these bootstraps all the way down to our deployment catalogs that then refer to the workload catalogs that produce containers or other artifacts to deploy. This is how we automate everything from the beginning. So that's great, and it all makes sense to think about that in theory, but it's probably going to be a little bit more easy to understand if we see it in practice. So with that, how about we jump over to the demo? Right, so now basically what we're looking at on our screen here is our Backstage portal on the left, and this is the landing page that you see when you log in, and our Argo CD automation on the right. So if you're not familiar with Argo CD, basically you make Argo CD aware of certain repositories in GitHub or GitLab or whichever you use. And when it sees changes to those repositories, it pulls the repository and performs some actions. So in our case, it's going to look at the service catalogs for our user space workloads, and it's going to see entries for individual applications, and they're all going to be deployed. So let's get in and see that in action. But before we do, let's just have a little bit of a quick sidetrack into discoverability that I mentioned before. So let's imagine that we're a support engineer on call at 2 in the morning, and basically our Vault API has fallen over and we're no longer pulling secrets. So as a on-call engineer, I can come in and just type in Vault, and I see here that we have an add-on, which is the actual Vault install itself, and then we have an API. So I look into that API's record, we right away see that it's owned by the GitOps management group, belongs in the GitOps services system, and even better, down here in links, we have a link out to a Slack support channel. So there you can see the benefits of tracking all of your assets. It really does make every user who uses your software or builds your software's lives easier on a day-to-day basis. But that's enough of the little side quest. Let's actually go and create some things, because this is where it gets exciting. So I've jumped into the create page, and this is where we see the instances of that entity type template. So we don't have many set up here, but normally you're going to see 5, 10, 20 of these, depending on the number of programming languages that your organization uses. So here you can see that we have 2 different types of Express APIs, one version 5, one version 4, a Java Gradle library, and our internal service catalog. Projects that I've worked on, you might see a Java Micronaut example, you might see a Spring 3 example, you're definitely going to see a Python example, some other data science things. So yeah, basically this is where people can come and can say, right, I need to create one of these assets, and they're going to get that all fully configured. So let's get our catalog going. So we're going to launch our catalog. We're going to give it a name. So this might be the car park catalog. So we run a car park, and we've got to keep track of all those cars. So now we're going to select some other entities from the system. So this belongs to the GitOps management group, and it belongs to the hypermedia platform domain. This is a car park manager. And now we just go and create. So now in the background, what Backstage is doing, it's using its scaffolder tool to basically go and pull that template, run some of the helper functions that we've built in the background there to actually populate that template. It's pushed that up, creating a repository, and we have then made some entries in a catalog bootstrap and a system record in the metadata. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst us may well have noticed that while we were talking, we've actually had a car park catalog project injected in here. So basically, if we take our list down to car park, we can see that a series of components have been installed. So we have our bootstrap, we have our root app, and we have some actually individual components here. So here we're looking in, this is the view of the catalog itself. So the catalog, as it's built by default, has an entry to initialize that catalog. So that's gone out and created some of the things that we need for every catalog. So it's got a project, some other RBAC things. And then basically the next step is to fire out the observability stack. So while we will need the services to be installed to actually get the Grafana dashboards and the like, this has installed some affordances to allow Prometheus to capture logs so that as soon as we inject those services, then basically the information is going to be available in Jaeger, in Prometheus, in Grafana, and all those other places. So that's great. We have a service catalog, but you're not really going to make many service catalogs because they really map to a system. So a business might not have too many of those. But what you are going to do quite frequently is you're going to create new services within those service catalogs. So let's say we need to do exactly that. We're going to add a microservice to our car park. So we might do a Boomgate manager. Yeah, Boomgate service. So that's out here to basically, make sure the boom gates are all okay. So in the grub, we'll give it a boom. Service type basically is going to change that metadata that gets created in the background, but this is going to be a service, so we'll leave it as that. The Helm chart is how we configure the leaf, if you will, in the service catalog for this workload. So basically this is going to have things like the secrets that it needs, the environment variables it's going to need. We're using Helm basically as an API into the service catalog, and inside of Helm we will add cross-plane for resources that we need to create in the cloud or on premises or in other locations. Next, we need to select our catalog. So that's the entity that we just created in that last run through the scaffolder. And here we see it, the car park catalog. So we'll select that. We need to select the owner and the system. We have a ticket in the backlog to get rid of those. Now that we're creating our own catalogs automatically, those should be derived from that. So again, we're going to select the car park system. We're going to go up. And now we're going to again create that resource. So now basically the same thing is happening, but this time we're having some entries placed into the catalog for the car park, and we will limit this. We'll change this view again because once again, while I was talking, some things have landed. So if we come and we have a look at the root app, we can see where we had two. We now have the car park boomgate service. So the application, Argo CD has found that new application that's been injected in the catalog, and it has launched it. But we also have this entry here, which is the actual application for the service itself. So you can see that that's landed, but right now the pod is broken because even though we've created the repository, we haven't yet got a container image created. So how do we do that? Well, it's happening right now. Let's have a look. So let's have a look at what's been created in Backstage. So we'll open our catalog. And so now we're seeing the entity record for the service that we just created. We can ignore this error. This is just telling us that it hasn't yet found the API resource for the service. It's waiting on an internal resolution process to happen. In a minute or two, that will have completed, and then you'll be able to go to this API tab and see the Open API definition for the service, which is pretty handy. But what we want to do is we want to jump over to GitHub, because if we jump to GitHub, we're taken into that service. If we jump into actions here, we can see right away that there's actually an action running right now. And that action is creating a hello world container from the repository that we just created. And then that's going to be injected into the container registry. The container registry is going to emit an event that we're going to hear. And then we're going to see that that red heart will turn green as that completes. While we wait for that to happen, let's go and have a look at what creating this did to our service catalog. So we'll just open another browser. We'll jump into the car park catalog that we just created. And if we jump into the catalog folder, we'll see now there are 3 folders, just like there were 3 entries in the root catalog for the car park service, and that we have just injected this boomgate service. And that's how that's what Argo CD has seen, this application set here. And that's seen that there is a dev green environment that this needs to be injected into, and that's what's happened. Now, while we wait for that container to be deployed, we'll just have one last look. It looks like the container image has just landed because we can see the container is trying to launch itself now. While we wait for that, on the left, there it is. So it's gone green. Hooray. So that's pretty amazing. In less than 3 minutes from initiating the creation of the repository is created with its continuous integration affordances, with its testing capabilities, with all of the things that it needs to launch a container. That container has been launched into our development environment. And the last thing that we'll look at is this file here in the service repository itself. The tilt file is how we run our environment locally. So if you pull this repository down, type tilt up in the root of the project, it's going to launch that same hello world container that we've launched into the dev environment. And finally, looking at the bottom of the file, you can see 2 functions that are grayed out. And basically these allow you to use our local development environment repository, which is sitting next to where we would put this repository in our local system. You can then uncomment other workloads or platform services that you need to run locally. So normally we have messages coming in via a webhook into a webhook service. So we would enable that webhook service by uncommenting it out. And then under app services, we're going to need a Kafka bus for the service we're working on to listen to get those messages as they come in. So we would basically enable Kafka. DynamoDB if we need a collection, and we're going to be able to do local development as if we're in the cloud. So that was a really fast introduction to automated initiations of service catalogs and user space workloads. I hope you found this interesting. If you did, put a like on it and come back and see us next week. Thanks very much.